Hello and welcome to Horror Rewind. This is Kelly Florence.
And I'm Meg Hofdahl.
And today we're talking about Midsommar. So this is the follow-up to Ari Aster's, was it his first movie, Hereditary? I don't know if it was his first movie, but his big hit, Hereditary. And this is his second movie. Just came out today. Well, yeah, technically yesterday now. And the freshness of the Rotten Tomatoes went down by like 14% overnight since we saw it, which, I mean, that's fine. It's still in the 80s. It's pretty high. But when I had first seen it, it was like a nearly perfect Rotten Tomatoes score. So that, I have to say, plus my opinion of the his first movie, really influenced my expectations. How about you?
Yeah, I didn't know much about it, but that's kind of how I walked into Hereditary too. But now I was armed with all this expectation of that this is going to be just like Hereditary in the sense that it's going to evoke the same emotions that Hereditary did for me. And like looking back, Hereditary is my favorite movie probably of the last year or two. So, and then when I found out about the Rotten Tomatoes, I had a very high expectation, which is, it's tough to go into a movie with those high of expectations. Maybe it couldn't have lived up to it. I don't know.
Yeah, true. So just to preface this by saying we will be getting into spoilers, and if you haven't seen Midsommar yet and you don't want to know anything about it, we would suggest you stop listening probably, or you can fast forward to later in the episode when we will be talking about other things in the world of horror. But first impressions, it's a well-made movie. It's beautifully shot. I liked it a lot. I'm going to be giving it a positive rating. But like we just established, there was so much expectation that it never got to the place where I thought it would go or needed it to go. It just sort of, the plot followed what I thought it was going to be, and it never veered from that. How about for you?
Yeah, for me, I very much enjoyed right away. It had the same pace and feeling and music, and just it right away made me feel like Hereditary, where I felt like I was being drawn into this really sort of morbid story, because it starts out, with her parents and her sister dying, her sister committing suicide and killing her parents, and they were establishing the characters well and the setup and everything. But I think what fell flat for me was that it sort of seemed natural that it would go into a human sacrifice way, and that things would sort of happen the way they did. And so with Hereditary, what was so fascinating was it was like this family drama, and there's this whole idea of grief and responsibility, and it's happening in sort of this very grounded, real family home, yet at the same time there's this supernatural element. And then this one, they kind of throw that same thing at you, where it's like, it's gorgeous landscapes and it looks perfect, and who wouldn't want to stay a night in this Swedish little commune? It seems so welcoming and beautiful, but I needed just a little bit more. I needed my mind blown a little bit more. I needed my expectations sort of shaken, and it just didn't happen.
So I really like the setup of the beginning and this family, and struggling with depression or mental illness, and then of course this grief that our main character ends up going through because of the death of her parents, and probably a little bit of guilt too. And I liked how she was talking to her boyfriend, and then she called a friend and was saying, oh, I'm leaning too much on him and I'm depending on him too much, and then ends up we see through this process that, that's the only person she has left, basically, in her close circle. And I thought that was really well established. And then also, as soon as we got out of the movie, I'm like, this is the reason this is such a great premise, is because, these characters are going into another culture, another country, and none of us want to be offensive to other people's cultural beliefs or religious beliefs, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I don't want to be xenophobic, so you know what, I will just go along with this, and I will drink that thing that you're giving me, or I'll do this because you're asking me to, because I don't want to make you uncomfortable because I'm already uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, and what I kind of thought was interesting in this movie is a lot of times in horror movies, but also just movies in general, a lot of times these sorts of topics come up in African cultures, Asian cultures, cultures where, Americans are scared or feel like even more sort of out of their depth. So it was kind of interesting to see it in Northern European sort of setting because I wonder, as most of the characters were white, sort of how if they went along with things even more than they would have if they were in Green Inferno, for example.
Yes, I was thinking about that, and the otherness was not so other to most of the characters. They maybe looked similar, and it didn't seem so out of the ordinary because it's like, oh, it's Sweden. There can't be anything too out of the ordinary happening here in Scandinavia, but of course there was. But yeah, I appreciated that too, that setting.
Yeah, and also that makes me think of Danny, the main character. She actually looks Scandinavian, so I think that was deliberate. I also thought her styling was interesting, and I wondered if, I don't know what your take on it was, if it was sort of to show someone who's depressed, or if she's just that type of personality who's like dressed down more. But it actually struck me in the movie where most of the time when we're watching a movie like that, the female main character is styled perfectly. Her hair is cute, her clothes, she has different outfits every day, that kind of thing. Like, that's what we're used to. So I was just wondering if you noticed that and what you thought.
I noticed it too, and I was thinking it made her stand out from the rest of the characters in the village or the commune because they were all always seemingly in dresses and white and with their hair done, maybe not makeup done, but they just seemed very perfect and fancy, and she seemed sort of messy and relaxed and not put together. So then when at the end when she does get dressed up, it's like, oh, okay, she's absolutely looks like one of them now, and you can't tell them apart.
Yeah, that's true. When she's the May Queen, maybe it kind of gives it even more of a little oomph there because she wasn't styled to begin with. This movie made me think of The Wicker Man. I haven't seen the Nick Cage version, but I've seen the original version. It made me think of that a lot, and it also made me think of The Lottery. What were some of the things that came to your mind?
I thought of the recent movie The Ritual from Netflix. They were literally again in Scandinavia, and there's this weird pagan, strange different rituals happening and sacrifice. Speaking of sacrifice, I noticed this theme, and you'll be reading about it in our upcoming second book, The Science of Women in Horror, but this theme about the elderly, and in their culture, I think the age was 72. When you turn 72, you sacrifice yourself. And I was looking more into it, and there's this concept in many cultures across the globe called voluntary death, and that the elderly will kill themselves or go on impossible journeys or set out to do an impossible task that they know they will die from in order to not be a burden to their people. I mean, so that's fascinating. And then these guys were like, oh, we're going to write our thesis on this because they're anthropologists or studying something. But isn't that amazing?
That's crazy that's a real thing. And it's fascinating to think about then what do these people believe is the point of life, and this concept that like we're on Earth to get married and have kids, so when we're 72 we can't have any more kids, so we're a burden now, instead of seeing it as your family's there to like lift you up, and you still have a contribution. Like, that kind of bums me out to think that people, and I'm saying 72 in the movie, but in whatever real construct, that people feel like they don't have anything more to give in their elderly years. I think that's something in American culture we need to work on, is making people feel valued.
Yeah, definitely. And this, through this research I saw too, there's absolutely a flip side to that. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's cultures who revere their elders and hold them up so much that they believe they have all the answers and even have magical powers because they they believe that with age comes wisdom, which, I would agree with. I think we, like you said, American culture, we might fit somewhere in the middle, and a lot of cultures would never even consider putting their family members into a nursing home, whereas that sort of has become the norm in recent years. So it is fascinating when something like this horror movie gets you thinking about real things. And even though this concept of voluntary death sounds outrageous and fictional, it's absolutely based in truth.
Yikes. That's obviously one of the most haunting parts of the movie, when the two people, kill themselves, and it's very gory. And of course, I don't mind gore. And I thought that there was just a lot of good haunting images in this movie, and unsettling images. We sort of intercut her dead parents, and even in the beginning they show her parents dead in the bed, when she's calling, and you think they're sleeping, and there's just a lot of good, like, little moments, and that's, I think, why I felt a little deflated and a little disappointment, because again, it's so beautiful. The performances are good. I'm not going to say the performances are like Toni Collette level, but they were very well done. Chidi from The Good Place. So I just felt a little deflated, because I was just waiting for that extra oomph, that extra moment. And I think it was about the time of, like, the sex ritual, I realized it wasn't going to get to where I needed it to get.
Yeah, I agree. That part too. I was like, oh, okay, this is it. This is the climax. No pun intended. But yeah, that was that. Something else. You mentioned some unsettling imagery. I like how Ari Aster shot and did the camera work, or if it's considered special effects, with all of the drug trip weirdness stuff, because things that they weren't seeing reality exactly clearly, and then it was a little fuzzy around the edges, or strange things were moving in within the frame that shouldn't have been moving or pulsing, and that was very unsettling. But there was some drug reference, like some bad trip references, that we could tell the people around us who have experienced bad trips apparently really got, and they were laughing, and we're like, oh, okay, these people have done drugs and we don't get this reference or whatever. So sorry, I'm so lame.
No, we're not cool at all. I've never been on mushrooms, so I really couldn't relate. But yeah, I really liked the concept of something that was kind of through the movie, was that when she was tripping, she kind of felt like she was becoming part of the earth. And I really like that concept. It's something I've played around with in my own writing, this idea that, like, the place has some sort of significance, and, like, the nature itself has a sort of consciousness, and I really like that, and so I thought that was cool. There were so many things I did like about this movie, but I feel like maybe it was feminist, but I'm not sure. And I just wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, and especially, the final sacrifice. There's 9 people put up for her to choose from, and her boyfriend is one of them. And, she goes through this grief after she sees him having sex with this woman, surrounded by a plethora of women. And so we almost feel like, oh, she's not going to pick him because she loves him, and they would need to escape together, but she absolutely picks him. And is it because she's trying to punish him, or has she become part of this group now? Has her mind broken, or what is that message? I'm not sure.
And that is fun, and that's what I love about movies and literature and all of it. I love when I'm kind of put in this position where I'm like, well, I could argue different points. I don't know. Because part of me was like, she's smiling, and I kind of found myself smiling with her at the end, when her boyfriend was going up in flames. But at the same time, like, did he have all his faculties when he was part of that sex ritual? Like, maybe we shouldn't give him all the blame, but at the same time, I thought back to originally, the way that he treated her when she wasn't around, when he was talking about her to his friends, and they were all very misogynistic, and they were like calling her crazy and all that, and all of them died and she lived, and she got to sort of make a choice at the end. And the whole time she'd been kind of pulled through this needle eye where it was like she didn't get to make any choices. Her sister annihilated her family. She goes on this trip that she has no agency of, and then all of a sudden she gets to make a choice, and she makes it, and she seems pretty pleased with herself.
I don't know if there's more to this or not, but they talk about, like, the leader at the end was saying, oh, thank you to this guy who is the friend who ends up bringing all of them there. And they're like, oh, for his insight, so basically he knew these were the right people to bring and sacrifice, and maybe ultimately that Dany would be the May Queen. So did he really know that she was going to end up coming with them, or was that just a happy accident? Did he have anything to do with those people's deaths, or was that just a coincidence? Like, I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, right away, when they met in the field at the beginning of the trip, and this other person from the commune was like, oh, this is a couple from London. I'm like, okay, they're bringing people here to sacrifice them, which unfortunately was true, which sort of goes in line with the problem of I was able to predict that, and I wanted something a little more unpredictable. But yeah, and again, like, yeah, I was like, oh, this Pele, I think his name was, like, I was like, he's in on this, obviously, and he was. To what extent, I don't know, but I think he definitely knew they were going to die, and he seemed really pleased that she was coming, but who knows, like, if he manipulated that situation or what.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, and all the human sacrifice, and then the voluntary death, and all of these things. Yikes, Meg, don't bring me to a Scandinavian, like, pagan ritual commune, okay?
I feel like if anybody's going to bring anybody to that, it's going to be the Finnish girl. I know I'm kind of lumping all the Scandinavian together, but no, I was actually thinking, I'm like, this trip would already be my nightmare before anything bad happened, because going on a trip like that with with my man and a bunch of his friends, first, no. Second, I don't want to do mushrooms in a field. I'm sorry. I know a lot of you listeners, that's like what you like to do, and that's great, and you do it, but that's not me. And I don't also want to sleep in a big communal room where there's a baby crying all night.
I was just going to say, the haunting of audio of every night they're trying to sleep, and then this baby crying, and you never saw the baby. I don't think we ever saw it. It was just icky, and then she keeps asking for sleeping pills, and oh yeah, that's also my nightmare.
Yeah, I don't even need the human sacrifice to be like, I'm getting out of here, thanks. I'm like that one guy who, like, wanted to go to Stockholm and hang out there. That would be me. I love the countryside and all, but no, I'm good. And I think we're at a point now where cults and communes, we should all be a little wary about what's going on over there. But I did like the concept that they're writing, is it Thesi? Yeah. They're writing Thesi on it, because I felt like that was like a legitimate reason for, like, these Americans to be there. And obviously there was the Swedish influence of Pele, who kind of, like, drew them in, sort of like, almost vampirically. But I don't know. I even kind of like when they were arguing about their thesis. I thought that was kind of interesting. I sort of like the academic world and things like that, so I thought it was interesting. And it stinks that I have to, like, not give this movie a 10, because it's so beautiful, and I love that, it's not necessarily a new way to look through at horror or anything like that, but it's just such a beautifully shot movie, and it's intellectual, and it's good, but it just didn't quite get there for me.
Speaking of although it's not a new way. One thing I did appreciate, though, is it is absolutely all during daylight hours because it is midsummer and the sun doesn't set. And I was in Finland decades ago now, but literally over midsummer. And truly, you could be outside golfing at 3 a.m. because it is that light out. And so I appreciate that because a lot of times horror is set in the dark or at night or a place where the sun doesn't rise. But it was bright AF all the time, and every color was so vibrant. Normally, you don't associate that color palette with horror.
That's true. That's a really good point. And yeah, and I feel like that would be so bizarre. I've never been in that experience. I was in Alaska, and that was like the latest I'd ever seen it, bright recently. But that would be very bizarre and almost like kind of like throw me off to have. So I can almost see the eeriness in having daylight at 3 a.m. But yeah, you're right. And I think, something else I've always loved is rural Gothic. And so this idea that like everything's perfect and everything looks good and that there's this small group of people and they all sort of are of one mind. I love all that. And yeah, I mean, even like just the table settings were gorgeous and the flowers, my God, those were beautiful. So it's just like a visual feast. And you're right, it's not something you're used to in a horror movie. And I think it sort of challenges those expectations, which is really cool.
If you think of anything else to say, certainly bring it up. But otherwise, let's rank Midsommar on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being you hated it, 10 being you think it's a perfect movie. Our scale, do you have an image or an object that really stands out to you from the movie?
What about our scale is that big like it's like a sledgehammer they kept using on people's faces and stuff. How about that?
Oh yes. Okay, so how many sledgehammers do you give Midsommar?
I'm gonna give it an 8 because it kept my interest. It was beautiful. It was well made. It's intellectual, but I just wish that there had been a little bit more layers to it, so I got the same. It just didn't evoke the same emotions that Hereditary did.
I also am giving it an 8. The movie was wrapping up at the theater last night when we were watching it. I was like, yeah, it's probably about an 8 for me. I again was hoping for that 10, but it just didn't get there. I too was. I mean, definitely some shocking imagery, but we also knew, like, the most shocking part, when the old people killed themselves, like, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, that's the problem, is I wanted some stuff, like, and at the end of Hereditary, for example, and I can't help but compare, I bet I was, like, pretty much, like, levitating off of my chair, because I was just like, oh my God, I felt so much, and at this, like I said, I did smile with her at the end, but the things that we thought were going to happen happened, and I was waiting for more to happen with that kid who is disfigured. Yeah. Like, I thought there was going to be more there. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. Well, let's talk about the thing that we saw the other day, which I already talked about on the podcast last week, but you haven't had a chance to weigh in yet. I took Meg to Child's Play because she hadn't seen it yet, and I was like, you have to see this movie in the theater. So Meg, do you want to share your thoughts?
You texted me right after you saw it, and you were like, it's amazing, and that right away, I knew I had to see it immediately. So yeah, I loved it. It was so funny. It's my dark sense of humor, like just a morbid sense of humor. I loved everything about it. I loved the gore. I loved the main character, the boy, what's his name? Andy, of course, Andy. I like that he was older, so we got to kind of see things through his eyes more, and so the mom kind of took a back seat. But I also love Aubrey Plaza, of course. And I really like that they kept it in the urban environment, and that she's still a single mother, and they don't have a lot of money, and that that's always something I really liked about the first Child's Play. I thought it was I think the one thing that we were saying about Child's Play is they aren't particularly scary. And I wouldn't say that I was terrified during this movie, but that's okay because I felt emotions. I felt actually poignant sort of feelings at certain points for Andy, and even for his mother. Just as a mom, I could sort of feel some of her, like, I don't know, I felt maybe more emotion during this movie than I did Midsommar. Oh no.
Yikes. No, I get what you're saying. And also, like you were saying, maybe it's not like a scary movie, but the concept is creepy that we are bringing these AI things into our homes for our kids to play with. We are doing this currently. This is real. And what if, I mean, they're all connected to the cloud, quote unquote. What if they go bad and start manipulating things or people? And like, it's such a good premise. Like I said last week, I'm so glad they didn't possess him with a serial killer.
Yeah, I really like that it was sort of this Vietnamese techie that sort of programmed him to be evil, and that they went a different route. I don't know, I haven't like seen what everybody else thinks about it, but I know it got good reviews. I sort of wonder, like, what do the diehards think about it? Do you know? I don't know.
I know before the movie came out, I know a lot of diehards were mad because of the way he looked and that he was robotic and stuff. But like I said, all of those things that could have been problematic, they leaned into and solved. It was a beautiful movie too, in its own way.
Yeah, I mean, it knew exactly what it wanted to be, and I think that I saw the most recent Chucky movie that came out.
Of Chucky?
Yeah, Cult of Chucky, I believe, and it was fine. But I think that this movie sort of rewound a little bit and sort of went back to not being afraid to have a little bit of that poignancy. And I sort of like that he wasn't this, like, swearing like a sailor, sort of, like, because it was funny when they would, like, make him swear or whatever, because he had an innocence to him, and I think that innocence made it more scary, because then when he sort of turned and he watched too much Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I mean, it's like sort of like what can happen to anyone, where it's like 9 times out of 10, if you watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you're going to be okay, but there's that one out of the 10 people who, like, are never the same, and maybe they start, like, wearing faces, you know? So I sort of like it. I thought that they had interesting things to say, but they never were heavy-handed, and I think that it was a fun movie. I was laughing. I love the bit with the head in the wrapping paper. Like, that is hilarious. And yeah, they leaned into being funny and cheeky, but in sort of a different way, and I hope they have a sequel.
Yeah, I would totally watch that. And, they brought in those little, like, different furry animals and the costumes for Chucky. Like, that was hilarious. So, anyway, yes, I loved it. Was there anything else that you saw this past week that you want to talk about in the world of horror?
Yeah, I watched a really random movie. And I still don't really know what I think about it.
Okay.
Called The Perfection.
What is it? Because I feel like I've seen it on Netflix. I mean, you know, like the title. Is it Netflix?
Yeah, it's a Netflix movie. I'm not going to say too much since you haven't seen it.
Oh, wait. No, this is with the women with the... Yeah, no. I talked about this a bit on an episode, but I didn't get to talk about it with you. I was like, oh no, I know what this is, and I don't think I can watch. But then it kept... changing, and so I did end up walking away being like, okay, actually that was a badass movie.
Yeah, I was like, every time, like, you kept thinking, oh, this is gonna be this kind of movie, and then you're like, oh, it's gonna be this kind of movie, and I just, like, I didn't know, but it was very well done, and it was twisty. It had more, those are the kind of, like, twists we wanted in Midsommar, where it was just a little, like, you didn't know what was coming. And it ended up being, like, a rape revenge movie, which I thought they handled really well. I thought that they, like, depicted it the right way. And I thought Allison Williams was really good in it. And she sort of, like, she had a little bit of that get outness in her. But then when you realize she's not the bad guy, you think she is the bad guy, but then you're like, no, she's not the bad guy. And so you kind of go through this whole roller coaster. But it was one of those things where, like, at the end, like, when it was over and it was such a bizarre ending, I was like, okay, like, you just kind of come out of it like, but I keep thinking about it, and it definitely was not boring.
No, and I said this before when I talked about it briefly. The truest horror is being anywhere, but especially a foreign country. You don't speak the language. You're on a bus tour and you have diarrhea?
No, that was literally, I was like watching that and I'm like, this is my worst nightmare. This is worse than going to a Swedish commune. Like, she's so sick. She's with somebody she's like only been with for like a day. And nobody speaks the language, and she's like, I'm gonna have diarrhea, and I'm like, this is my horror movie right here.
I know, and it was, I mean, the visual effects were really well done too. I mean, because at first I'm like, wait, she's really throwing up maggots, which, okay, I can get on board with if this is happening, but then of course we find out it's all trippy and stuff, and like you said, so many twists. I kept thinking like, oh no, nope, this is turned, I'm gonna have to turn it off. And then I kept watching and it was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, same thing where I'm like, oh, okay, we're going that route, okay. Like, and then I even thought like it really was going to be like a post-apocalyptic movie where like, this like flu was going around or something. Like, for a moment I thought that was real. Like, I had no idea. So I thought it was a really intriguing, well-written script. And I still like come out of it and I'm like, okay, that was bizarre. I don't know how I feel, but I think I liked it though.
Yeah. I too wondered if I was gonna be on board, but yeah, I came out of it, and I would say definitely watch it. I mean, we haven't even given it that many twists away because it's too hard to explain.
Yeah, I mean, and I still think the most horrifying part was the diarrhea part. Oh, I wanted to talk about something Luke just told me, and this is the only information I have, but did you hear that Chris Rock is rebooting the Saw franchise?
Yes, I did read that, and are we really that far out from the last Saw movie? We're not, to get a reboot? And what? Why? What's happening? I mean, how do you feel about it?
Well, I don't really know why Chris Rock is involved, but I mean, I have faith that he must care enough to like put the work in. I mean, if he's invested in this. But yeah, I mean, a part of me, I think like what you said, it's like maybe we could just wait at least another 5 years or something. I mean, just to like give a little space. I personally like the Saw movies. I mean, I don't know about the last couple. Jigsaw, it was alright. But I very much like the concept of Saw, and I think that they always were like trying to say something, but they also like, were very cringy, and I don't mind a little bit of that torture stuff if it's done well. I mean, I still think about like that pit of needles and stuff, so I think they did a good job. And also just Tobin Bell was a good like baddie and stuff. I don't know if anybody's hungry for a Saw reboot.
Yeah, I like you said, I think it might be too soon. Then again, we had just gotten Cult of Chucky and they made a new Child's Play, so what do we know?
That's true. You're right. That's a good point. So maybe we're prejudging here. Well, I'm intrigued. I'll have to wait and see. And did we already talk about the Dr. Sleep trailer?
No, we haven't mentioned it.
I just want to say that that's one of my favorite trailers I've ever seen. Talk about bringing feelings to me. Like, I told you, it's not one of my favorite Stephen King books. It was kind of a letdown in the way that Midsommar was a letdown, where it's like, it was a sequel to The Shining, which is one of my favorite books of all time and my favorite movie. And it was good, but I don't know, I feel like I need to read it again. Maybe I just was having a bad month. But the trailer with Ewan McGregor and the Shining music, I mean, I think I ascended to heaven watching that.
No, it gave me life, and I can't even believe that it exists. And speaking of that movie, Mike Flanagan directed it, who we love, and it was just announced that he's got another Netflix show coming. The title is Midnight Mass, which is ironically or purposely the title of the book that the character in his movie Hush is writing, but it's about a small town priest or something. So let's see what happens.
Ooh, do you think it'll be a hot priest?
I hope so.
Yeah, either hot or evil, probably, or both.
Yeah.
I'll take both.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. I'm glad Mike Flanagan is working really hard and not sleeping and just creating lots of horror content for us, because I absolutely love everything he touches. Yeah, Dr. Sleep looks amazing, and what I would love to ask him, if I could ask him a question, it was how did he square up in his mind? Obviously, he loves Stephen King. He did Gerald's Game. How do you reference a movie, because he referenced the movie itself, not the book, that Stephen King hates with every fiber of his being? Like, how do you do that? Because you want to make people happy because everybody else loves The Shining. So, like, how do you balance that? I would love to know.
I know, and apparently he did a good job, because Stephen King is okay with Dr. Sleep, and part of it, probably for film rights or something, they reshot. Those are all new scenes recreating the original movie, so he's not even using footage. Isn't that amazing?
Oh yeah, I mean, it looks like it's pulled right from the movie, and oh my god, I can't even wait. And yeah, I mean, and who knows, maybe Stephen King's lightened up. It's been many decades. Maybe he doesn't hate The Shining as much as he used to. Who knows? But yeah, that's something that I would be curious to know about. And then, I mean, if that's not enough, and we've talked about it before, but we saw the It Chapter 2 trailer, Part 2 trailer last night at Midsommar, and I cannot wait for that movie. That's coming out September. Can you remember when Dr. Sleep's coming out?
I think it's November.
Oh god, there's just too much.
We have so much to look forward to, and plus, like, a right smack dab in the middle of those two movies being released, our book is being released. So make sure to pre-order, or make sure to look and see where we're going to be, because we're going to be coming around and giving some talks or doing some signings, and just talk about all the things that we love in the world of horror. What a time to be alive.
I know. I may have had a little bit too much beer when we started Midsommar, but I was like starting to almost cry, because I was like, I love horror so much, and I have a book coming out with Kelly, and I love talking about horror, and our book's about horror, and like, I don't know, I just always think back to that little girl who had a Lydia poster in her room and loved horror so much, and somehow I made a career out of it, which I don't know how I did that, but we're living the dream.
We certainly are. So tune in next week. We're going to do a full-on rewind and talk about an older movie next week. But until next time, we'll see you in the horror section.
Bye.